Good morning, guys. How you doing? I'm Lisa Edwards, the CEO of the Exclusive Career, and this is the Exclusive Career Coach podcast you're listening to, episode number 373. We're going to talk about job seekers. Your AI resume is not fooling anyone. Sorry, but I'll explain. As a reminder, I have another podcast, and it's the Exclusive Career Podcast. And last week's episode was number 40, and it was on the differences between burnout and misalignment. I had done an episode 2 weeks before that for the Exclusive Career Podcast on what to do when your senior role becomes unsustainable. So those two podcasts together make a really nice complement. How to identify the difference between burnout and alignment in yourself and in your direct reports. What does it look like? What to do about it? All the things. Today, I'm going to do a deep dive into what really happens when you, the job seeker, submit an AI generated resume. It is interesting to be on this side of the table, if you will, with the AI kind of explosion as it relates to the job search process, resume writing, and all of that, because it apparently is affecting all of my colleagues as well. And we think that that pendulum is going to swing back because people are starting to learn that number one, AI is telling on itself. I'll tell more about that. And also, you cannot expect a machine who does not know you and isn't asking you questions to be able to present you in the best possible light. I relied some for this episode on an article in the Washington Post from February 21st of 2026 by Danielle Abril. And I oftentimes will get ideas from an article, a post, something somewhere, and then I take a little bit of that. I want to see what they say. Danielle presented a very balanced approach, like, okay, here are some people who are, despite the warnings, still using AI to create their resumes and why they're doing that. But mine is going to be much more one-sided than that. I want to be clear in saying that AI is a tremendous tool in helping you customize your resume and your cover letter for each position that you apply for. But notice I use the word tool. The problem is when you allow AI to, I call it drive the vehicle, and you become this sort of passenger if you're even in the vehicle at all. And there's tons of resources out there, platforms that will allow you to put their resume. And I'm not going to mention any of them by name because I don't know the value of one over the other or which ones are just frankly scams. But there are ones out there that for a very reasonable price, and I'm going to use the word reasonable in air quotes, will redo your resume for you. But it is just taking what you have already put on your resume, which is usually job duties and not achievement focused. And if there are achievements in there, they're kind of muddled in together with job duties. They're not high impact the way that they're written. And it just reformats that. In a quote in this article from Joseph Eitner, who was at the time, probably still is, the chief HR officer for New York-based investment firm Eaton Capital Management, he said that he has no issue with candidates turning to AI to add some keywords, clean up their grammar, or even help them think through a question for the application. But ultimately, he said, candidates should do the writing themselves or have another human, I'm going to put that plug in there, express their own ideas and personalities and take time to manually submit their applications. I've talked previously about the fact that there is this proliferation of AI agents out there that someone like you, a job seeker, can sign up for that goes out and has a bot that goes out and applies on your behalf on jobs that you've never even seen, may or may not be a good fit. And I'm going to give you some quotes as to why that's a bad idea. So in this article, Daniela Burl says, quote, "It's easy to spot when candidates over rely on AI," some employees said. Oftentimes, executive summaries will look eerily similar to each other. Odd phrases that people wouldn't normally use in conversation creep into descriptions. Fancy vocabulary appears, and someone with entry level experience uses language that indicates they are much more senior, they added. She goes on to say, it's worse when they use auto apply AI tools, which will find jobs, fill out applications, and submit resumes on the candidate's behalf, some employers said. Those tend to misinterpret some of the application questions and fill in the wrong information in inappropriate spots. If these applications were evaluated alone, employers said they'd have a harder time identifying AI usage. But when hundreds of applications all have the same issue, they said AI's role becomes pretty obvious. The article uses the term augment as in allowing an AI tool to augment your resume and cover letter. I like that, right? I use the analogy of I want you in the driver's seat, let AI be a passenger that you're turning to and conferring with. They're a partner. It's when you let it in the driver's seat that it starts to become less like you and sound more like AI. And AI, again, is telling on itself and letting recruiters and HR people know this is an AI generated resume. I wanted to give you, I thought it would be useful to talk about how I use AI in creating world-class resumes and cover letters. I am one of 23 master resume writers in the world. So while my opinion is just that, my opinion, it is coming from a very high place of achievement in my industry. I'm going to give you some of my insider secrets that, in combination with what I'm talking about in this episode, will hopefully persuade you to not let AI write your documents and complete your forms for you, but rather, again, be that partner or augment what you're doing. So I want you to hear me loud and clear. I'm not against AI. I use AI in several steps in the creation process with my clients' resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles. And I also use AI frequently with clients when I'm coaching them, whether it's, hey, let's come up with some other companies you might want to apply for. Let's look at what other job titles might work for someone with your qualifications. There's so many ways that I use AI. But again, I keep saying it, and I'm going to say it more. I'm in the driver's seat. All right. My disclaimer for how I use this in writing my resumes for my clients is that um, every time I'm going to teach my clients. So my clients have a session called the Document Action Plan session. After I've written their resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, we spend a session together looking at how they can customize it. So they can either send me a job that they want to apply for now, or I will use a represent. I'll go and find a job on LinkedIn, and we will use that as a representation of what they're going to be applying for. And I will show them how to use AI, their AI of choice. I use Gemini, and I'm going to talk also about one other source that I use specifically for certain things. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently each time. So I'm kind of giving you one way of doing this, but I'm always looking at the specific situation of my client and how best to serve them. So what I'm creating for them, to be clear, is what I would maybe call the mother resume for this purpose. They're getting a resume that is 95% of the way there. That's my goal. That's what I tell them. So as long as they are applying for jobs within the cluster of what they have said they want to apply for, right? So I have my clients send me 3 job descriptions, and I'm going to be talking about what I do with those. But that needs to be, right? We don't need, I want to be a CFO, but I also want to run my own business, and I'm thinking about going back into pharmaceutical sales. That's not going to work. Can't write one resume for all of those. But if they are if they've given me a nice cluster of job descriptions that I'm working off of, and those are the kinds of jobs that they're using the resume for, they should be 95% of the way there. So then this becomes, what do you do in that last 5% that customizes that resume for each specific position, and very much also customizes the cover letter? So the first way that I do it is in analyzing job postings. So I mentioned I have them send me 3 job postings and I give them some criteria. I want them to be, again, jobs that are, kind of next steps for you, next logical steps, not pie in the sky. Very excited about the job. You're at least 80% or above qualified. And then I ask that those job descriptions be fairly robust, meaning that there's a fair amount of detail to the job description because otherwise it doesn't serve the purpose that I'm going to be using it for. What I do with those jobs is so I have them send them to me in a format that I can play with, right? So rather than like a PDF, and I combine all three, the job description part. So I take out anything about like benefits or information about the company. I just want the content of the requirements and the qualifications for each of the 3 jobs. And I put that together and I run that through AI with a prompt like this. And by the way, all these prompts are in the show notes should you want to get them. So here's an example of a prompt that I would do. I am writing my clients' resumes for these types of positions. Please analyze these job postings for A, keywords and competencies that are important to each job, and B, other significant things I should keep in mind as I write his resume or her resume. This step helps me in writing the resume and the cover letter. Notice I am not asking AI to give me anything now. At the bottom, it's probably going to say, would you like me to? I don't, right? I'm not there yet. I am going to be asking it to help me with some things, not yet. Because at this point, anything that it would write would be generic and AI sounding. Because remember, I haven't put their resume in there, so they don't know anything about this client. They only know what kind of job this client is applying for. So that's the first way that I use it is I want to see that and then go to the resume and it's a matter of like looking at those keywords. I'll use that find feature in Word. Is that already in there? Is it in there in a way that serves that client? What this is not, and I want to be so clear about this, talked about it before, I feel like a million times. This is not filling up a laundry list in a skills section. AI will not score those keywords as highly, if at all, depending on the system, when they are divorced from where that skill or competency was displayed. So I make sure those words and competencies are in the client's professional experience section, not divorced, hanging off to the side in a skills section. Next, cleaning up awkward phrases. Even a master resume writer like me with 30 years of experience, sometimes can't get my phrasing quite right. I've got the idea. I don't like it's awkward to me. And I will ask, and I use Gemini for most things. So I ask Gemini to tighten up the phrasing with some prompt like this. This achievement bullet for my client's resume is awkward. Please tighten up the wording, remembering, because this is how I want it, to use a high impact action verb at the beginning and front load the achievement with the result. One of the things that I learned early on, at least with Gemini, is when I asked it to help me with an achievement bullet, it was putting the result, saving 25% as the very last part of the bullet. That is not where it should be. The bullet should be, resolved a $25,000 discrepancy by blah, blah, blah. And then the how comes after it. And when I pushed back to Gemini and I said, this is not the way professional resume writers are taught to do this, he said, oh, you're right. This is a higher level. I have to remember that you operate at that level. And I've done that with a couple of other things as well, where it was not using best practices in resume writing. So there you go, another reason. And I like the fact that at least Gemini will give me options. Oftentimes it'll take that bullet and say, if you want to focus on this fact or this part of the client's candidacy, go this direction. This option helps focus more on their financial management. This option helps more with their operational skills, and this one's more about their leadership. And then I can kind of look at that in the context of what other competencies am I pointing out through achievements in that same job, right? What else have I got going on? And which one of these options plugs a hole best, if that makes sense? So that's number two, cleaning up awkward phrases. I just don't like the way this is worded. It's not quite doing it for me. Give me a little bit better punchy thing. And oftentimes I will also say, make sure it sounds like me and not you. Number three, then I compare the draft against the qualifications for this position. So once I've gotten nearly to the finish line, now I'm going to put my client's resume into Gemini minus identifying information. So I want to make sure their name and their phone number, email, all of that. I don't want any of that in there. But I'm going to put it in there with a prompt like this. I have written this resume for my client. He will be seeking positions as, and I want to put in CEO, CFO of a consumer products good company, whatever, however specific I can be. Please analyze his resume and give suggestions for areas to strengthen to make him a top candidate for these types of roles. So at this point, I'm putting the resume in without the specific job description because AI has tons of jobs to pull from to give me the feedback it's going to give me. As long as I'm specific, and of course, a lot of that, what he's looking for is in his resume. We know that because of how the heading is laid out. So this step allows me to fine tune what I've written. In some cases, I will ask Gemini for, tell me more about this, or why do you suggest this? Or again, I'll push back on something that like, this one's not working for me, or this is not how we resume writers do it. But again, Gemini's my partner. I haven't made him upset yet. I'm the expert in the room. He's the partner. And then the fourth way I use it is generating other possible job titles. So in some cases, when I have a client who has it tends to be two things. They've had a very diverse background. So they've done a lot of things and they have a lot of interests now. So oh, I, for some people, we have to do some work up front to get them more focused because that is necessary. But for other people, I'm thinking particularly of a woman that I worked with recently who has a great background, worked with magazines and online publications that you would know as both a writer and an editor. Well, you know that field has changed dramatically with AI and with so many publications going out of business. So she was looking at other ways. We were trying to get creative so she wasn't too narrowly focused in her job search. What else could she be considering? So my prompt for someone like that would be, I have written this resume for my client for roles including, and I would list those. What other job titles should she consider for which she would be a strong candidate? And I love the kind of response I get from Gemini because it's not a laundry list, but it's like, okay, here's three job titles. She would be a strong candidate for them. And then here's why. Here would be a little, maybe not as strong, but here's what she would bring to the table for these. So I really like the way it sort of justifies everything that it gives me. The bottom line here is that AI recognizes AI. So the applicant tracking system, and that's what you're going to be putting your resume into, whether you are on LinkedIn or whether you are on the company's website, it is going to know if your resume is AI generated, and some systems will flag you for that. And further, you don't want your resume to sound like everyone else's or have, in the case that we kind of heard that quote earlier, have the same mistakes maybe in the application process that a whole bunch of other resumes have, pointing out that it's AI. And you also don't want your resume to be devoid of all the unique achievements and branding that you bring to the table. As of now, and I hope this doesn't change, there still needs to be humans involved in the process. Certainly you, because even if you work with someone like me, if they're good like me, they're asking you questions. They are deep diving to get those achievements out of you. That's part of the value that I bring to the table is I love it when my client says, that's a really That's a really good question. I hadn't thought of that. I know that I'm on the right track and I am excavating. I've used that term a lot lately in my podcasts, but I'm excavating until I find the gold for that particular client. Because the way that I excavate to find gold for one client is going to look very different for another client because I'm dealing with a different set of circumstances. So I hope this has been helpful in understanding maybe a little bit more about how AI can be used and as important, if not more important, how it shouldn't be used in the resume and cover letter writing process. So I will see you back here in 2 weeks, and I'll see you on my other podcast next week. Take care.